Hello and welcome to this week's video. Every 4 weeks I do a Procreate video where I use my fine art painting skills to create a digital painting. Today I'm going to show you how I painted this compositional piece of a sighthound dreaming of the chase, and then how I turned it into wrapping paper, fabric and greeting cards. Let's jump in. The story. As this is a compositional piece, first of all you have to plan it. I started off with a good reference photo and a genre that I love, and everything else evolved from that. You need a good story because the story will tell you the elements to include. My story included nighttime scene, so moons and stars and some hares. I needed a location, so it seemed obvious for it to be in a forest, which would include trees and foliage. My Art Nouveau genre would help me fill it with decorative ornaments like you see here in the sky and around the area the dog is sleeping. Planning the composition. To help with placement, I use the harmonic armature. In art, the harmonic armature is a geometric framework used to create harmonious, balanced and dynamic compositions. By aligning key subjects with the grid's intersecting diagonals and proportions, you can intentionally guide the viewer's eye through the image. You want to reduce everything down to really simple shapes and then place them on your guide so it looks a bit like this. I then know that I can fill my negative space with foliage and ornaments. As this is going to be a repeat pattern, I need to make sure my shapes are positioned correctly. I find it easier to work on a canvas board divided up into 4. It's easy to do this in Procreate, you just use the built-in grid guides. Tap the action menu, the spanner icon in the top left corner. Under the Canvas tab, toggle on Drawing Guide. Tap Edit Drawing Guide directly below the toggle. Tap 2D Grid in the bottom menu. Adjust the grid slider until you have exactly 2 columns and 2 rows, or use a numerical input box at the bottom to set the grid size to perfectly divide up your canvas dimensions. Tap Done. You just have to be mindful how you draw it out. For example, I may draw my moon along this intersection, and then when I'm happy with it, I'll copy the layer, draw in my baseline and my 2 side indicators, and then move it down just like this. Each item will have its own layer. So the background is a layer, then the circle the dog is lying on has its own layer, then another one for the dog, and so on. This allows you to move things around really easily. I don't tend to do a line drawing, I will do a simplified value drawing. Checking compositional alignment. Once I have done a simple value study with all my elements on their own layer, I then check my compositional alignment. I export my value sketch as a JPEG and I use a 2x2 grid done as before, and then lay my black and white sketch into the grid to check my alignment and how it looks. If items are out of alignment, remember you can copy layers from other artwork. I'll just copy my object from my value study, paste it into this document, then move it to where it needs to be. This artwork then becomes my correct composition. Value study. Once I know my composition is correct, I then begin to fix my values. Planning a piece in values first is the key to making this work. It separates the lightness from the darkness of your subjects, allowing you to establish a strong focal point, control the flow of the eye around the composition, and allows you to solve major design issues before committing to colour. As I have my story to guide me, some elements can be pre-decided. For example, a dark nighttime sky, a light moon, and stars. All my other objects will then sit somewhere between my darkest darks of the night sky and my lightest lights of the moon. I work on a 2x2 grid for this so I can keep my alignment correct. Make sure you continue to work on each object on a separate layer. Sometimes you may need to do multiple layers for one object. For example, the circle was made up of many layers as I worked out all the detail. If it is quite complex, you are best off grouping layers together. If it is quite simple like the tree, I just combine them together when I am happy with each one. This was my first value study. You can see at this point my dog was darker and my circle lighter. Much later on, when I got to the colour phase, I reversed this because I could not get this version to work, and it was much easier the other way around when it came to choosing my colours. Once I'm happy with my value study, I just export it as a JPEG. If you are wondering how I came up with those decorative flourishes and ornaments, I have a number of books that I use for inspiration. These are really great and they allow you to use up to 10 items from one book in each design. If you love decorative artwork, there are lots of books like this on Amazon that you can buy relatively cheaply. I tend to use the book for inspiration and then adjust the ornament I'm going to use to fit the space needed. I export this image out as a JPEG and lay it on a new canvas board as a single tile, making sure I have placed it correctly to take into account my repeat pattern alignment. Colour study. I do a line drawing from my black and white artwork and use this as a guide on my top layer. I use my value sketch as my reference. I then begin to block in my big shapes in one colour. Figuring out a harmonious colour scheme for a design this complex can be quite challenging. I would recommend deciding on a colour scheme before you start. I have chosen an analogous scheme going from yellow, green to violet. Use the colour wheel to help you. There are lots of different combinations you can try. Analogous is just one. There's complementary or split complementary. You then use your value sketch to tell you where to put the colours. Remember, every colour has a value. So, for example, red would sit here, yellow would sit here. Using your value sketch, decide the colour hue you want, so maybe blue, then use the value to tell you how light or dark your blue should be. If I want a mid-value blue, I could choose anything around this area as long as I don't go too light or too dark. The more complex your design, the harder this is, but just note that I always put the adjacent colour on the colour wheel next to the one I've chosen. So a green next to a blue, next to a purple, next to a blue, next to a green, etc. This ensures harmony in my design. Once you can see your chosen colours are working, start filling in the variations within those shapes and just build it up gradually. It is easier to work on multiple layers like we have been doing. Take advantage of the alpha lock that allows you to paint within a shape. I did this for this detailed area, just to give it a bit of colour variation. What brushes you use is up to you, but I use brushes like the technical pen where I wanted precise line detail, or the round brush for slightly larger shapes. I also used my wet brush too. This included the wet acrylic and the turpentine. You might find you need to change some values. I changed the value of my dog to make it white as it worked better. Putting it all together. When you are done, you can create a new file and tile up your repeat pattern design to give you something you can use to make wrapping paper, fabric, cards, etc. This design was very ambitious, but you can start off with something much more simple and gradually work up to something a bit more complex. So have a go and get creating. I hope you've enjoyed today's video and found it useful. Please like and subscribe so you don't miss future videos. You can find lesson opportunities on my website sarahhallidayart.com and also examples of my work. Thank you for watching and see you next week.